Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is because I said so. If you're new here, hi, I'm Nikki, and if you're not, hi, welcome back. In this channel we talk about sewing, creativity and DIY. Today we're going to be diving into one of the most important skills every sewer needs, how to read sewing patterns and measure yourself correctly for sewing. However, before we start, I've got a little challenge for you. Somewhere in this video is a hidden sewing machine. Drop the timestamp in the comments when you find it. Buying patterns online is super convenient and you can find a huge variety to choose from. This including unique designs that you might not find in stores. There are so many websites where you can buy traditional sewing patterns from, like Decode and Sew Essential. Obviously there's plenty more others as well. Each have their own features and I'll show you how to navigate them. If you're unsure where to shop, look for reviews, recommendations and plenty of sewing communities. It's time to explore the product images. There are often a few different varieties, and when you click on it, make sure you look at the description, what fabrics or embellishments are required, sizing options. Make sure that they have your size and the accurate measurements. Whether it's digital download or physical copy, that's really important. And always check the pattern instructions, especially if you're a beginner. First things first, we're going to talk about traditional sewing patterns. They're like a blueprint for sewing. They're a set of pre-drawn templates, usually printed on maybe paper or tissue paper, and it just shows how you cut the fabric and assemble it for a specific garment. Think of it as a guide for creating clothing that will fit and make you look great. So, for traditional patterns, they often include multiple sizes printed on the same sheet. Different lines for each size. You'll need to choose the correct size based on your measurements and carefully follow the right set of lines. These solid lines are the outer edges of your pattern pieces. You're going to cut along these lines for a specific size. Notches. These are often small triangle or diamond shapes along the edge of the pattern. These will help you align the pieces correctly. A lot like matching the sleeve to a bodice. Some patterns have single notches on one side and double notches on the other side. This will help you which edges go together. A tip. Cut inwards in the notches instead of outwards to avoid weakening the fabric. Now these double point arrows mean that this is the edge of the pattern and should be placed on the fold of the fabric. Don't cut along this edge, it will create a seamless symmetrical piece when it's unfolded. Now these are dot markings. There's triangle and diamond shapes inside the pattern to indicate dots and the shape of the fabric for a fitted look. You'll sew along the dot lines to make sure and then you press into shape. Pleats. These are arrows or lines to show where you fold the fabric to create pleats or tucks, depending on the pattern piece. Now the broken and dotted lines, this is the seam allowance. These lines often show where the seam allowance is. This is the space between the stitching line and the fabric's edge. Check the pattern instructions to see exact seam allowance is, usually 5 to 8 inches if you're working with maybe traditional patterns or American style patterns. Usually over here we'll do work in centimeters as well, so it's different for each pattern, but make sure that you check which one it is and how much for seam allowance they're allowing you. These are lengthened and shortened lines. They're horizontal double lines with the space in between them. They are for adjusting the length of the piece. These are perfect for making garments fit your height specifically. Now for me, I'm only 4'11", so there's going to be a hell of a lot of shortened lines. These circles and triangles show you where to sew the buttons or where you're going to create buttonholes. So there are pattern piece labels as well. Each piece will have a label like front, bodice, sleeve to tell you exactly which part of the garment it is. It also might have instructions like cut to and cut on fold. Now once you've got to the point where you've cut your pattern, use tools like tailor's chalk, tracing paper, fabric pens to transfer the markings onto your fabric. Be sure to mark notches, darts and any important dots. Now for all the tailor's chalk, the trace paper, all of that stuff, you can go to my last video, which should be here, to show you what those symbols, what those in tools are and how you go about using them. Now one way you can stay organized is to highlight or circle different size lines and symbols right before you start cutting to avoid confusion, because there are a lot of lines, there are a lot of symbols, so I think it's best just to do that first. So instead of going for the physical patterns that we've already discussed, we're going to look at how you go about constructing and printing and downloading digital. All the patterns that I've ever downloaded come with a PDF file, and all the good downloadable patterns have a detailed instructions on the print settings. They should also have a printing box. Once you've put in all the recommended print settings, you print this page and measure with a ruler or a pattern master to check if it measures up correctly. If not, adjust until it does. Once you've printed it, you'll notice that there's small markings or guides like numbers, letters and arrows, and that will show you how to align the pages. You're going to cut the edges as close to the edge as possible, and then if needed, you're going to use tape or glue. I personally use tape because I think that's just easier to work with. And then you can put that together to create a full scale pattern. So it depends, do you want digital or do you want a paper copy? If you want digital, then that's great. Literally it's a download right away. However, there's a bit more work in constructing the pattern before you make the garment. Physical patterns are best if you prefer printed templates that you literally open it up and you're ready to go. So it's really up to you. Everything in life, there's always going to be pros and cons depending on which one. It depends what kind of pro and con you're willing to take on, especially as a beginner. If you're more advanced or if you know a lot more about pattern making, obviously you know which one you prefer. It just depends. I mean, for me, I do love the digital because it's instant and I don't mind sticking it together. It can actually be quite therapeutic. I don't really love working with traditional patterns because the tissue paper is just so thin and it just one slight move and you're ripping it all through and then stick it together again. Anyway, for me, going with digital is so much better, but you're gonna, as you go forward, as you move on, you're gonna know which one you're gonna pick. Now on to something that is my personal favorite, is making your own patterns. Making your own patterns allow you to make things exactly how you envision them, plus it's not as complicated as it seems once you've learned the basics. Pattern drafting is a process of creating a blueprint for your garment. You start with the measurements, you draw the pattern pieces, and then you come together to make your design. Now, to be honest, there are a few ways to make your own patterns. You can draft completely from scratch using your own measurements. You can copy from an existing garment that you loved, often called cloning, or you can modify a commercial pattern, which is digital or traditional, to make a pattern completely from scratch. I mean, I went to school for this, so you have a pattern book. So one of the more popular pattern books is Wilfred something, I'll put the image in here, and that one is where you literally have a big piece of pattern paper and you measure and you do with your measurements or whoever you're going to make it for, and you go along with that. It's a longer and slower process, but you actually learn a lot of the basics of pattern making and pattern drafting, as it's called, so that's really cool. For a lot of the tutorials that I'm going to do on this channel, it's probably going to be cloned clothing, where you just have a piece of, you have a skirt or a favourite dress, whatever, and you're thinking, oh, would that look good longer? Would that look good shorter? Could I kind of use this basis and I know I like it, I know how it fits, and then make that into something else? I just feel like you can literally go to your wardrobe and make it. It has such a low barrier to kind of go past, and then you can learn the basics of pattern drafting like that. And if you want to go into more detail about stuff, obviously there's going to be a mixture, but for this, I think a lot of the time that's what I'm going to do is cloned clothing. Work on a large surface like a table or floor. Take down your pattern paper if it tends to move and separate the garment into its main sections like front, back and sleeves. Lay each piece flat on the pattern paper. Using a pencil or fabric safe marker to carefully trace around the edge of the garment. I also use something called a tracing wheel as well, because sometimes you can't really get down into the paper like you should, so that's also helpful. But you can also even take it up at the side and then draw around it. You're going to carefully draw around the edges. Don't forget to add seam allowance at the end as well. Like that can really mess you up because then you're going to make it a lot smaller than you need it to be, and you need a seam allowance in every single pattern for clothes making that you're ever going to find. You're going to need a seam allowance, and then you're going to check the original garment just to make sure about the fit and everything like that. Another thing that I'm going to do a lot on this channel is anything from a charity shop or anything that's from your own wardrobe and making that into something new. Again, low barrier to entry is something you already have, something already cheap to do, but you can still learn a lot about garment construction using those clothes. And if cheap enough or something that you don't really care about, if you mess it up, it's fine. I think a lot of this is going to be about play and discovery, and I just really feel that making things and sustainability, FYI, upcycling is where it's at. So that is going to be another thing. You can also still use pattern drafting skills that you will gain and learn over time to put into upcycling, making your own clothes. Like that's a big part of it as well. When making patterns completely from scratch, literally a piece of paper, pencil, maybe a pattern master and a ruler, you can do it two different ways. You can do it via the paper, again, pattern master, ruler, all of that, or you can do it digitally. I discovered many years ago a website called Seamly where you can make digital patterns, which I'm showing you here. Now this might be a little bit advanced for somebody that's a beginner, only because you'd have to know a lot. This program doesn't tell you anything. I think it's for people that already know quite a bit about sewing, about making. I think it's even for people that have like fashion businesses and stuff, and you can make your own patterns and like that. The benefit of this though Again, you'd have to print it with maybe Illustrator or something, but it saves a lot of space. Pattern making, you have to have a lot of surface area to do, whereas doing it on the computer, you don't even have to have that much or any surface area at all. As long as you've got a computer, a printer, that's what you can do. If you would like me to go into how to use this program, anybody that's a little bit more than a beginner or quite advanced, but you've never heard of this program for one, or you just want to know more about it, I'll be more than happy. Put in the comments down below and I can make a tutorial for you. For this, you're going to need measuring tape, a sewing specific one, a notebook, pen, pencil, pattern chart to record your measurements on. Again, I have my measurement chart right here. Please make sure you let me know when you want to download it. This will help you to record and to keep the measurements somewhere so you can go back to them, refer to them when you go on to make your own patterns as well. For the bust measurement, it's going to be taken at the fullest part of the chest. This is usually across the apex of the bust, which is the highest point, and around to the back. Make sure that the tape is level and not too tight, not too loose. You want to make something accurate, but also very, very comfortable, because it's something that you or somebody else is eventually going to wear. For the waist measurement, that's typically the narrowest part of the torso. This is located above the belly button and below the rib cage. You're going to wrap it around You're going to wrap it around a bit snugly, but not too tight around this area. For the hip measurement, that is taking the widest part of the lower torso. It is usually 7 to 8 inches below the waist, depending on your put raw or the The hip measurement is taken at the widest part of the torso. This is usually 7 to 8 inches below the waist, depending on the mannequins or your proportions. Again, the tape doesn't have to be too tight, not too loose, and has to be straight and even. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. I put a bobbin emoji so I know that you made it. Also, make sure you write in the comments if you found the missing sewing machine. Next week's video, we're going to be talking about mastering simple seams and stitches, so make sure you subscribe to see that. Last week's video was a basic introduction to basic items that you need to start your sewing journey, which is right here. Or YouTube thinks that you're going to love this. I hope I made